I did start drinking when I was 12 with my mom, and my mom would like to play quarters, and she would get mad if I wouldn't drink with her and say, "Oh, you think you're better than me?" And
this is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
So like I built this wall, and nobody knew the truth. And then I got to this home, and I mean, I acted out. I mean, I gave them a run for their money, but they did everything they could to solve it. And it got to a point where they wanted to adopt me.
Well, that guilt that you're talking about, was that guilt, did you feel like you were damaged goods?
No, I felt like I didn't know what they were suffering through. Like I didn't know what my mom was suffering through. I knew she was like had to do some jail time for charges from when I was young, and I felt like it was my fault. And if only I could hit it better at school, or I just felt guilty. I didn't know where my sister was. I didn't know if she was also in foster care. I had no idea. None.
Did you ever find out where your sister was eventually?
Yeah. So the family wanted to adopt me when it came time for their parental rights to finally be terminated. And we went to court. And I remember that they told me and prepped me that my mom was going to be in this courtroom. And this was the first time I would have seen her for years. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if I could just lock eyes with this woman, she'll know that I love her and like I've missed her and like I just want her and she's going to be so happy.
And you want to go back to that.
After all this stuff. After all this stuff. That's how resilient children are. They still love their parents. They want to love their parents.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, some parents don't deserve to be parents.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that about your mother, but that's the truth.
So I walk in this courtroom and she's in handcuffs and shackles. And she looked at me and she said, "You look like an effing Norman Rockwell child." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew like her tone was not good and she wasn't happy to see me. And we went back to the foster home, and like a couple weeks later, I got a letter from my mom, and I remember it saying like, you know, if you're adopted and you let them adopt you, I won't be your mommy no more. And like basically, how dare you live this comfortable life while I'm in jail? And guilt got me. This like distorted sense of loyalty got me, and I told them I don't want them to adopt me.
It's a guilt trip.
Kids. I guess I never thought of it that way. Do you have a say whether you want them to adopt you?
So they respected what I said. So I told them, and they said, if you go to 6 weeks of counseling, and at the end of 6 weeks, if you look us in the face and you tell us you don't love us, we'll let you go. We'll call your caseworker. We'll send you off. And we went to 6 weeks of counseling. I didn't say a word. I was scared. I felt like if I said one thing, that all the emotions would come out and they would realize that I did really love them and I wanted them to be my family. I just didn't know how to accept it. And I told them no. The hardest lie I've ever told in my life is the end of that counseling session when we were in the parking lot. And I remember the foster mom grabbing me by my shoulder saying, tell me. And I told her, I said, I don't love you. And I don't want to be a part of this family.
Wow.
Oh, and that probably...
Probably tore you up and tore them up.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Their heart must have been broken.
Yep. Yeah. And what happened? Called my caseworker. By this time, I'm 12 years old, so I'm older. So you appeal to a whole new variety of men, and some really, really bad things happened in one home I was in. And I said, you know what? I'm not nobody's victim no more. And you have a red folder in foster care. And I knew before they terminate rights, they try to contact every biological family member. And I knew there was information in this folder. So I broke into this current foster mom's room and I stole this folder and I ran away. And it's back when I snuck on a Greyhound because I found this address, a New Jersey address. It's all it was. No name, no phone number. And it's when kids rode for free on the Greyhound. So I would hold the little lady's coat in front of me. And it took me 8 days. Sometimes you get on, sometimes you don't. Trying to take a Greyhound up here, and the address turned out to be my dad's sister.
Well, how'd you survive 8 days with? I'm assuming you had no money, or did you?
No.
How did you do that?
People give you food. They see a little kid, and by this time, my powers of manipulation were pretty good. You know.
You had to develop certain skills that the normal the normal 12-year-old doesn't have.
Yeah.
You had to be a little bit cunning, probably a little bit manipulative. Mm-hmm. God.
But when if someone saw someone on a Greyhound, don't you think they'd call the police? You know what I'm saying? You get this 12-year-old
Back then, the people that rode Greyhounds weren't really all that.
You're not talking about the top brass.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're on a Greyhound.
Yeah.
True.
Which made me incredibly comfortable, right? Because if I was with some kind of different demographic, I would have been uncomfortable because I would have stood out like a sore thumb.
You had a certain connection with that type of people.
I felt safe.
But now you're 12 years old. You're out on your own. And now you appeal to you're a victim to a whole different crowd of people. Mm-hmm. What was...
Especially men, because I'm sure you're starting to develop at that point.
12 years old, yeah.
So that was actually the safest I've been as far as like predators are concerned, because they put me back in contact when my mom was out of jail with my biological mom. And I spent my time chasing her around like I was her victim at that point. And she kept me very isolated. You have to remember, if I was seen outside with her, she would get arrested for kidnapping. So I was very much hidden. Like I couldn't go outside during the day. I could not enroll in school. Last grade I completed until I got sober was the 6th grade. Like I couldn't go to school. I couldn't do anything.
Were there any moments of clarity with your mother?
No.
I got a 13-year-old. So this is hitting a little close to home. I can't imagine. Number one, my 13-year-old's 6 foot tall, so I don't think anybody's going to hit him.
He ain't riding no Greyhounds anytime soon.
Yeah, he doesn't fit too well in a Greyhound seat. But I can't imagine him being out on his own devices. Because at 12 or 13 years old, your decision-making, you think it's good, but it's probably not the best.
But I didn't even have the luxury of running in crowds. I was hidden from the world, fully dependent on my mom. Reconnected with my sister. My sister was never put in foster care. My sister was sent to live with family. My dad, my aunt, and when my mom got out of jail, we reconnected. I mean, nothing stable. It was like living in this state, living in that state. My mom would bartend. Sometimes she would go to work and not come home for 2 or 3 days, and we'd have nothing to eat, and we couldn't leave because then people would know. And like we seen what happened when you ask for help. So we would like ration out coffee cakes and like food. There was no like free time. I was just hidden, chasing her around, trying what I thought at the time to keep her alive.
And did your dad ever come back into the picture?
So we reconnected with him off and on. My dad by this time was a severe alcoholic. I think he suffered from depression too. I just remember like seeing him off and on and him crying and like apologizing for all those years I was in foster care. I never shared with my mom or my dad what happened to me when I was in foster care. It was kind of a burden that I carried. I didn't want to put too much more on them. It wasn't only until recently my sister found out.
And your sister was, for all intents and purposes, left untouched. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's some positive news, because that worry, that thought of the unknown probably weighed very heavily on a 12-year-old's shoulder, as you developed.
Yeah.
Is she younger sister or older?
She's a year younger.
So how long?
So you were kind of taking care of her. It was your younger sister. It was...
I feel like she was very level-headed, a lot like my stepson. I mean, I feel like she was very... rational. I did start drinking when I was 12 with my mom, and my mom would like to play quarters, and she would get mad if I wouldn't drink with her and say, "Oh, you think you're better than me?" And like I started all that. My sister went to school, and she did well in school, and she was able to leave the house. And
this is not only this stuff. This is why I wanted you to come in here, because this is stuff that you see in movies.
Yeah,
and you think that it's cinematic license. It's not. This is real. And even though it's 2023, I'm sure it's still happening over and over and over again. The system, as much as the system tries to guard against these things, there's still these bad people out. Bad people are always going to be around.
Yeah, the good people that work for the system, they're just outnumbered.
Yeah.
They're just completely
overwhelmed.
Outnumbered.
They're trying to do the right thing, but again, they're part of the system too. And
How long did it last where there was, stability is not the right word. How long did this last with your mother and your sister?
So, stability is not the right word. She would leave us and not come home. I was probably 14 when I ended up homeless in Daytona Beach. My mom sent me to the store. This is like, I laugh about it, but I'm in touch with the fact that it's not all that funny. You know, I sometimes don't realize like how dramatic this stuff is until I say something and see the look on some. To me, it's normal. It's all I knew. So I got sent to the store and I come home and she's gone. And she's like, we lived in some seedy hotel and she's like packed and moved. And that's when I ended up.
So your mother, wait, hold on a second. Time out. So your mother sends you out and then just.
It leaves by the time I get back. Gone.
Where was your sister at this point?
Fuck is this
My
woman?
sister was back with my dad.
Who the fuck is this woman?
Yeah.
God damn! How do you do that to your blood? It's a foreign concept to me. It really is a foreign concept to me. And you know, kids, especially at that age, 14 years old, will they'll start rebelling against their parents a little bit, and they'll say, "Oh, I hate you. I hate you." Really? Do you? Well, let me introduce you to Staci Ellis. Okay, you say you hate me. I'm going to show you when the hate is, because I don't know whether it was hate or not, but it sounds a lot like resent. You sound like your mother really resented you. I
felt like she did. I really do.
If I went out and I came home, my door was locked and I couldn't get in, I felt like I was homeless. You know, and I knew my mother was coming home soon. You know, it's just my door was locked. How do you come home to nothing like that?
And it's not even shocking in the moment because you expect things like that from her.
It's strange to expect.
It's just like, what now? What next?
But what do you do at that point? You go to the hotel and she's not there. I mean, what's your next step?
So, I mean, luckily Daytona Beach has a lot of hotels. I used to sleep on like the lawn chairs out back of the hotel.
Weather's decent.
And that's about it. And just putz around. Then I started getting into the drugs and the drinking and heavy acid use at that point.
There was a short time in my life where I was homeless, and we're talking like 3 weeks. All right. And I was an adult. I was 20 something. And I lived in my car. And I remember the feeling you try to find some place. At least I had a domicile, which was my car. I remember trying to find a place just to bed down for the night. You know, half the time I'd get woken up with a flashlight in my face, making sure I was okay. But I remember the hopelessness, like the hopeless feeling, like this is it. This is how it ends. Did that ever cross your mind, like that hopelessness overtake you?
So a few times, but I honestly can tell you I felt grateful that I wasn't in foster care.
So being homeless is better than being in foster care for you. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously, if you get lucky, that's a different story. Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be sponsored by any foster care companies coming up anytime soon, I think.
This is something. How do you communicate to a young child to say, "Hey, pick up the phone and call us. We can take you to somewhere that's safe." When you're not safe, when you're being abused, when you're being physically and sexually abused.
And my behavior up to that point, like. You're
put
on a certain list. Like, I behaved terribly, so there's a lot of homes I wasn't eligible to go into. Like, I was ranked, whatever the ranking is, differently.
This isn't Annie, you know? This isn't Daddy Warbucks is not going to come and take you away. I'm sure there were some kids in there that hoped for that. Mm-hmm. So you get involved in the drinking and the drugs. Mm-hmm. When the first time you got drunk, did the pain subside a little bit, or did that feeling or did it just numb it a little bit?
The first time I got drunk, I was 5 years old with my mother. She used to think it was funny to give me beer and watch me stumble.
Yeah, watch this kid stumble around.
So my God. When I started drinking without being encouraged to drink, it was tied into that same memory of this is what I have to do to be accepted. And also my situation was hopeless, like you said. So to reach oblivion on a daily basis was good. It makes you a little less conscious about...
It was numbing, and it was a break from reality.
A break from reality. And then I got to a point when I was 17, and I was like, there has to be more to life than this. And I called my old caseworker. And I said, I need help. Like, I don't know what to do. But what I'm not willing to do is go back into foster care. Like, I need to emancipate myself. And they just started developing this program called the Independent Living Program in Florida. And it's where you could kind of be emancipated and live on your own and receive financial assistance. They just had certain stipulations. So you had to have an apartment willing to rent to you. You had to have your GED. You had to have $1,000 saved in the bank, and you had to have a job. Well, with no ID, no nothing, I felt like it was impossible, but I always knew, like, there has to be a way to do this.
You were really a lost child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, you could have said your name was Phyllis, whatever you wanted. You could have made up whatever you wanted to do. Did that ever happen?
Yeah.
Because, you know, in order to get something that you needed to survive.
Yeah, I started to save the $1,000 I needed. I started working at some hole-in-the-wall pizza place under a false name with some ID I found from somebody in North Carolina that was probably a tourist in Daytona, and I got the money saved. And I was one of the first people in the state of Florida to emancipate themselves and get entered into this program while on runaway status. And I did it over a little payphone with a hearing with the judge, and that's when that began. But by this time, like, yeah, now you think like that's the end of the story. Now I had this raging drug problem. I was a full-blown alcoholic, but I never knew it was a problem because that's just what people did.
It was the norm.
Yeah, it was the norm. I had no idea.
Did you ever engage in any type of criminal activity in order to survive?
Yeah.
Statute of limitations is probably over. So.
Yeah.
So, like, what would you do? Like, if I'm a tourist down in Daytona, you see me as a mark. How would you go about doing it?
So you get them real drunk and you rob them. That's the quick and easy check-in for
a guy who was
cars.
interested in you, like
Not even necessarily. You get the young kids that are there on vacation interested in you, teenage boys, young adult boys, and then you get them to rob their dad for you.
Yeah, it's not a crime unless you commit it.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, so
and then what's my name? You know what I mean?
She still got the North Carolina ID, so nobody knows who she is.
Yeah.
Why is your name Sid Horowitz?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, how bad did the drug problem get?
I mean, it got real bad. Looking back, it wasn't as bad as it would have gotten, like in my 20s and 30s, but it was bad enough so I really couldn't function. And then I started being able to function above the board, right? So like now I could get a job in my name and an ID and a driver's license, but I didn't know how to live. I had no example. I didn't know what credit was. I didn't know anything. So like my solution to that was marry some older surfer dude.
That could take care of you.
So you get married.
I got married.
Okay.
Don't remember nothing about it. It was like some drunken weekend.
I've had a couple of them.
Yeah.
I never got married on a drunken weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What was that marriage like?
I mean, it was all blur. I don't really remember.
Was he drinking and drugging too?
Yes, he's the one that introduced me to opiates. And not like he said, here, take this. He was doing it. I found out he was doing it. And he couldn't and wouldn't stop doing it. So I was like, you can't.
Opiates such as heroin?
Started off with pain pills.
Pain
this
pills.
Is back in Florida when the pain pill mills were big.
Yeah, those pain pills are. Nobody ever thought they'd.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the statistic I heard is when the pharmaceutical companies developed those pain pills, they said only less than 1% of people will ever get addicted to them. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I just started taking them, and then we started having. I don't think I ever took the marriage seriously. It was like a
marriage of convenience.
It was just a marriage of convenience. He had his life, I had my life. I can't ever tell you that I feel like I was like completely in love with him, and like I always knew it was temporary. And
at least it was something. The illusion of stability. The
illusion of stability. That's what I was aiming at. And right before we got married, I came home. This is when answering machines. I'm really aging myself now. We're out. And I come home and there was a message on the answer machine from the foster parents that wanted to adopt me. And they just wanted to know how I was doing. And all those years passed by. I've had no contact.
How did they find you?
I don't know. I still don't know how they got that phone number.
Put a tracking chip
Maybe.
on you.
I don't know.
Get a chip in her somewhere. They know you. They know she's here now.
So how did you get out of that situation?